So my name is Essi Jukkala. I'm a lead game developer as the title. I work at this new gaming studio called Wondershop in Helsinki, Finland. The game scene in Helsinki, Finland is really active and booming. We have a lot of companies in Helsinki and all over Finland. So it's a nice place to make games here. So about my journey. So in high school, it was really hard to decide what I want to study when I graduate. So I was considering like everything from like studying photography to being a maths teacher. So a wide range of options, and it was really hard to kind of decide. And most of my friends went to study like, okay, economics and medicine. And I was like, oh, nice, but not really my thing. So then after some thinking, okay, I set my mind onto acoustics and audio processing. That would be my thing. I had done music a lot and played the saxophone during the school years and everything. So then I went to Aalto University to study electronic and electrical engineering. And then afterwards I got in. I realized that the path is not as straight as I had imagined. There's a lot of steps before I would be an audio engineer or anything like that. So I had to start with the basics of like electrical engineering and mathematics and physics and all that. And I was like, yeah, this might not be actually the thing that interests me, even though the end goal would be really nice. I would love to do acoustics and stuff, but the road seemed a bit long and the student life became maybe a bit more interesting. So then what of course happened is that during the first year I got to try programming at the university, and I really realized that, hey, this is much more fun than the basics of engineering, physics and mathematics and all. So I switched to programming. I didn't program that much before university. I had tried some things, but not much. So I'm not one of those people who have programmed since they were three years old or anything like that. But programming, studying that in the university led me to computer graphics, which was really cool. After that, I kind of realized that, hey, I can make these cool things with my code that actually visually appear on the screen. And I studied that for a while, for a year maybe. And then I found out that there's this master's called Game Design and Production in Aalto University. So I was like, this could actually be the one that I can kind of study to combine all my programming knowledge, but also my interests in everything nice and visual, interest in art and music and everything. So then all of those kind of seemed to, the puzzle pieces fit. And I realized that, hey, maybe game development would be really nice actually as a career. And yeah, I did play when I was a kid, but I really didn't think myself as a gamer even until a few years ago when I realized that I actually play quite a lot. And I didn't even know that you can do games for a living. Only learned that in the university, or didn't even kind of think about it. So now I'm a programmer in the gaming industry. I've been working as a game programmer since 2017. So something like 4 years now. And now at Wondershop, we are making a game that hopefully combines the real world with the digital, so something really new and kind of emergent. And we also have this hope to have an impact with the gaming in these less privileged communities. That's really cool that maybe I can actually, with programming, do something good in the world at the same time. And I love that. But in the daily work, I think the best thing, I think it applies to all of programming. The best thing is definitely to get to solve different problems and seeing the actual your handiwork being used somewhere. And that's really cool and motivating. And what about the like in the game development, it's really nice that there's this really creative aspect present. It's not just making these websites one after another, but it all starts from some idea. from really cool game idea, a concept, someone imagined something really cool, and this is what we get to make into an actual game. And it's a really creative thing, not just maths or programming, but really being creative in the process. And in general, at least in my companies that I've been part of, the most important thing has been the attitude, not any like skills necessary or those like specific skills. The most important thing is the attitude that you don't think that if something can be done or not. It's just how you think that we can solve this, we can do this, let's just figure out the way. I think all of the kind of startup culture and especially game culture, we are always dreaming of like new ways, new games, new ideas that no one has ever thought of, and then we try to make them real. So let's talk about making games. How does that actually happen? So in our company, we develop these game features very iteratively. This is very common in games and in software development. As usual, the features are never ready when you first make it. So how do we start? First, the design. We get the design. This in web development, this would be that you get the layout and mock-up from a UI designer or something like that. In games, we have people who are called game designers. They make the game design, and then we, of course, check that together, that I don't have any questions that they could answer and all that. And then the first thing to do is make a prototype of the feature, just the bare bones, nothing fancy, just to try it out. After we have that, we of course test it a lot, try to kind of figure out if it works or not. And then based on the feedback that we get from the testing, we polish it, add more depth to it, add maybe the art only then. And then it continues on. We test again, then we improve. And nowadays, the loop usually never ends in games, as they are more of a service nowadays, and also get these really frequent updates, and they are not as just make one product and forget about it as in the old days when you shipped a game, that was it, on to the next project. But now they live really long lives. I think Supercell's Clash of Clans is now celebrating 90 years of live game, and that's a hugely long, longer than most TV series even have been going on, and they work every day on that game, and that's really cool. So next I'd like to talk a bit more about what do I actually do daily work with an example, so you'll maybe get a better idea about what I do. So I already talked about that we do this kind of an iterative thing. So we design and plan and implement and test. So what I actually do, what is my part in this? So the implementation of the game feature, making the prototype even, starts quite similarly as in any software development, as I mentioned, but there are some different things maybe. So first, I get the documentation from the designer. I read that. Hey, all right, now we are making quests. So I hope everyone is somewhat familiar with the concept of a quest in game. Usually you get something, some tasks to do and get some rewards afterwards. All right, so then I make a plan about the actual technical implementation of the quests. What do they mean in our game technically? So, okay, I realize that quests need to be accepted by players. I need to know that there are tasks in the quest that you need to perform in order to complete the quests. The tasks can have different types, all right? There's crafting and collecting and etc. I need to track those. So the player, then when the player performs those activities, then those tasks are tracking them. All right, and then when those tasks are done, of course, the player needs to be able to kind of claim the rewards and complete the quest and be done with it. all right, this is my idea now. Technically, I know what all of these things mean. And then this is not the point where I get to programming yet. After that, I actually need to like plan the data. I need to plan what data do I need to be able to do this. So then I actually create the template. We call usually the game's configuration, or short config. There we add all the data. Okay, quest ID 1. These are the tasks that need to be done, and these are the rewards. And I make this template. Usually we use, for example, now we are using just Google Sheets. So then the designer goes and fills in those details when I have specified the format and everything needed. And only then, when the data is in place, I actually get to the programming part. So then I need to figure out, what do I actually do with the data to make this work? So, okay, now I need to first make the game client and server support this new configuration, make the classes or whatever to read the data in. Then I go into the server backend, depending on the project where that does live, and realize that, okay, now I'll make the functionality. So, okay, now I need to be able to add a quest to the player, track the tasks, complete the quest in the backend. And then in the client side, there's even more to do. The players need to be able to visually see a quest that, hey, this would be available you, do you accept it? Then the players need to be able to view the progress of the quest and see that the tasks that they perform actually affect the quest that they are doing. And of course, then in the end, they need to be able to claim the rewards. In our company, I handle kind of both sides. We are such a small startup. I do both the server and the client side things. And of course, in bigger companies, these tasks are divided so that one person works in the back end and one in the client side. And then even bigger companies, this is divided even more. So one works on the UI and one works in the game logic in the client and all that. But that's kind of the idea. And it's nice to know that one person can basically do all that. And there are indie game developers who do everything themselves. They make all the art and music and all the programming to create a game. And those are some of the best games I've ever played. So that's really cool. All right, so what's then when I've actually programmed the thing? Of course, while developing, I test that everything kind of works. But for example, when developing the backend, I cannot be quite sure that everything works until I've got the client side thing down too. And then I actually try them all together through the UI, see that everything works, try to break it. And then when I'm happy, then I only submit that to the project. So that's kind of my responsibility, where that my responsibility ends. Then it goes back to the designer, and they kind of make sure that everything works as they expected it to work, give me some feedback, and then back to the beginning, basically. So then we start the loop again. I get some feedback, I improve the feature and do the same things again. Of course, planning the data only happens usually in the beginning, but of course that might need some changes too. So it's ongoing process with the features. So an interesting point, or maybe you want to know, how long does this take? So for example, this example of quests, of course, really simplified, but the quest feature or any larger feature that kind of touches the back end, front end, UI, all that, usually takes 1 to 2 weeks to develop and to get an idea how this job or kind of tasks are divided. Usually it takes me 1 to 3 days of those 1 to 2 weeks to do the planning, plan the implementation, then plan the data. And then I take the 3 to 5 days to actually program it. So still that takes the most of the time, but that's not the only thing I do. And then in the end, 1 to 2 days for testing and fixing and all that before it's ready to go on and I get to move on to the next tasks. So that's the very usual day that I do working on some feature. Of course, there's different days. Some days I might work more on the design side. We might do everything together to ideate new features and figure out the game's lore or the world or whatever. And well, the few weeks ago, I spent a week just programming shaders and testing out some visual stuff and learning new things. So in game development, there's always new things to learn, and you are never kind of ready in that sense. Then a quick note about the tools I use or we use in our company. So currently I am working with Unity. I code in C# mostly. That's the client side of the thing. And then as our backend / database, we use Firebase, and we use cloud functions that are programmed with JavaScript at the moment. So we don't have a separate server in that sense at the moment, at least. And to add all this, I need to know some things about Bluetooth, as we have this custom controller that we've made, a custom wristband thing. Can't really share much about that, as that's kind of secret, but it just gives you an idea that you might tumble into these other things as well. So then with the Bluetooth, I worked with Objective-C to make it work on my Mac to actually be able to develop that. And then I needed to know some Java to make that work on Android. We are building for Android devices our game. And as I mentioned, we are also using Google Sheets. So a wide range of tools are needed to making a game. Previously, I've also worked with Unity before. In my previous company, we also had a server that was programming Clojure. That was really interesting to learn. We used Redis as the in-game database or kind of live database, and Datomic as the kind of persistent database. And before that, we actually made games natively to iOS. So then I was programming in Swift and Objective-C, and we used Realm as the database. And still then we were using Google Sheets. I think that's something that always carries on with you, or Excel for the game's configuration. And of course, other popular tools include, for example, the Unreal Engine, a big other engine in addition to Unity. Unreal Engine, I haven't used that much. I know the basics, but I've been mostly using Unity. And of course, C and C++, especially with Unreal, are the kind of programming languages there. Those I know. That's actually how I started programming. I started with C and C++, and that was really good, as I then studied the computer graphics and all. But basically, with Unity and C#, if you want to get started in game development, that's the way to go, in my opinion. That's where they have the best tutorials and best help available online. And it's also easy, as C# is a really popular language in general and similar to Java. So if you already know, for example, Java, then picking up C# isn't that difficult. But I think that's most of my talk or presentation, and then we can have some questions. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions for Essi, please do drop them into the chat now, because we have 15 minutes or so of time allocated for questions. Oh, here you go. Okay, so the first question: how much can a junior developer / programmer be expected to do in comparison to your role as a lead?
That's a really good question. So we were actually recently hiring a kind of a junior / kind of normal developer, not a lead. So for example, there, the basic skill set would be just being able to develop features in Unity based on the documentation. And of course, there, the lead and senior programmers will, of course, anyway help if you are stuck or need help in kind of implementing. But in general, like doing client-side programming with Unity and C# is a good skill set that can get you really far as a junior programmer already.
Next question. Are there any nice beginners tutorials for Unity that you recommend?
I think even their standard tutorials that they have are really good, and you can just basically online, there's a huge community, YouTube videos. I think most of the videos are really good. Just check that they are using a quite recent version of Unity. Unity moves forward so fast that some tutorials from, like, for example, 2 years ago might be already a bit outdated, but I think I've watched some just regarding, for example, shaders in this month from YouTube, and they were all really nice, and I found so many that I didn't even have time to watch them all. So not any specific ones, but a good starting point is just the actual Unity tutorials that are in their website.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to put a link to that in the description of the YouTube channel as well. Do you have a preference for server/client? I think it means server side, client side. Do you have a preference?
Yeah, well, not that much. I think that I'll go with anything. Of course, maybe my biggest experience on the server side, which was a bit kind of a odd choice, was the closure thing. But that was really impressive. I really like doing like functional programming in the back end. So I would probably go with something like that if I would have to kind of do a game server. There are other functional languages that I know that are used, for example, Elixir or Erlang. So those are also quite popular, but of course, most of the game backends are done in Java or C# too. So those are then, and for the client, as I've done kind of, for example, iOS native games, I think that's not as easy as Unity. And with Unity, you get the cross-platform and everything kind of out of the box, and they have really good support and tutorials. So I'll have to go with Unity, even though I'd like to make my own game engine someday, let's see, but that would be my choice.
It's a good goal to have, to create your own game engine.
Yeah, definitely.
Unity is really fun. I've played around with it, and it's super fun. Someone's asked, what was your biggest challenge when starting on your journey?
My biggest challenge too in becoming a game developer, maybe, or kind of actually working as one, is of course getting the first job. That's maybe one of the biggest challenges everyone faces when they are trying to move into a new industry or something like that. But that was really kind of difficult. I applied to like something like 40 jobs before I got the first one. So do not be discouraged if you don't get into the tech industry with your first application. With that helped a lot that I made actual kind of a portfolio and all that to share my work, what I've been doing and all that. But that was definitely the hardest one, and tackling the huge imposter syndrome when you don't get even to an interview and then you still feel like you maybe could be able to do something. And yeah, it's always the feeling like, do I really fit in here and can I do this? So I think those are the biggest challenges.
Your answer links very nicely to the next two questions. And the first one is, do you have a portfolio or public GitHub that you're willing to share? And then the second one is, what would a game developer interview look like?
Cool. Well, maybe I can share actually in the chat my portfolio link. There you can find at least some more contact details of me. And I think Kimberly, you shared my Twitter somewhere, so you can find me there too. So that's of course not a very complete kind of view of my works, as most of my game development work I've done with companies. So of course I cannot share any of those. But I think there you can get an idea about like what was in my portfolio, for example, when I was applying for my first job. So there's nothing much added since then because everything else is private, but there you can see at least something. There was some other question.
Yeah, what would a game developer interview look like?
Well, it depends really on the company. It's really, some are more focused on the kind of coding part, the math part, kind of understanding that. When I was interviewing for the game developer position, I approached it really practically. So I had this similar example of like whatever quest data or crafting data. And I presented the kind of candidate with the data in a JSON format that we actually use in work, and then had some basic project set up for them, and then told them that there's these few simple tasks. I like to see them actually code for me in the interview. That's the kind of technical part of it. And then they actually made it, and we then discussed like what was hard, what was easy, what did you know, is there some questions you would like to ask? And we did this so that you can actually program in peace. Not that I'm looking over the shoulder of someone who is programming, but as in the remote times we did that, I gave them 10 to 15 minutes in peace in the video call to program, and then come back and discuss what they did. So really practical approach in that sense. Some companies have kind of used these free tasks or tasks that you do at home before the interview, and then you basically in the technical interview just discuss the tasks. Those are really like kind of bigger companies do that. They use them as screening, so the best candidates then go to the actual interview. And those are actually really good too. Those you can usually then put to your portfolio, for example. I think I have 1 or 2 that I was kind of asked to make when I was looking for a position. So at least in my interviews that I've been at, it's not about like special programming, like any like small tasks or anything like that. It's more about what you can do and how you work and all that. I think it's in general moving to that direction in tech, and not so much algorithms or anything.
Perfect. It links really nicely actually to another question, which is, what advice would you give to someone applying for a junior game role to better stand out?
Yeah, I think the like really good portfolio with examples of your code, and preferably also a playable game where you can see what the code does. My portfolio site has some examples of that. So like describing what did you actually do in the project, why is it in your portfolio, and then showcasing some of your code and all that, kind of trying to show as much as possible what you can do. Because for the artists and designers, it's kind of easy. They usually have this nice portfolio to show that, hey, here's my art. But in the programming, it's not that easy, but I recommend to do basically the same as the artists, trying to just make everything nice and visual and add as much code as you can, and explain what you did and why. That's the most interesting part.
Perfect answer. Someone's asked a question that's specific to Unity. With Unity, do you use Blender? This person found creating their own sprites quite difficult in the past. So yeah, Blender,
yeah,
Unity.
Yeah, we're kind of, now I think we're using Blender. I've worked with different 3D softwares in the past, but that doesn't kind of matter that much from the kind of Unity point of view. From any like popular 3D software, you can export in this format. We use FBX, for example, and there you just need to kind of export correctly in that sense that you get all the textures or vertex colors or anything. So any 3D software will go, and of course, usually Blender is then the best choice as it's free. So
another question. What knowledge or experience do you feel that you are lacking that you need? For example, if you had a week off and you could learn anything, what would you do?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, half of the time I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. So that's the time when I usually try to learn something. Be it, well, I'm really interested in shaders and in computer graphics in general. That's really difficult. It requires a lot of math. I'm actually studying math on the side just as a hobby to try to understand things better. And then of course, like all the shader programming, server-side programming, there's always like so much to learn. But I think I've kind of adopted the point of view that I can always learn it when it comes my way. For example, the server programming with Clojure, I had no idea about that before we kind of as a company decided that, hey, let's use this. And then I took a week of learning Clojure, and then next week I was doing the features there. So it's good. Every time a job throws a challenge at you, then you just go and try to learn whatever skills are needed for that. So
Yeah, that's very, very true. So that's all of the questions that have been answered. Does anyone have any more before we wrap up? Oh, what is your favorite part of your job?
Favorite part, I think, is always kind of solving problems and learning new things and kind of doing something that no one has done before. Kind of the feeling when I Google something for help and then there's nothing much there. No one is actually kind of doing the same thing or answering the questions that I have. So then trying to figure that out myself, putting together all the previous knowledge that I have and good guesses and everything. And then when the big problem is finally solved and everything works, then that feeling is the best part of the job.
Nice. I think I'm going to now go away and play with some of the games that are on your website. Thank you so much for that presentation. I think it was incredibly insightful, and I think we definitely need to have a chat about getting a Unity workshop at Codebar. Yeah, huge thank you. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time. And yeah, huge thank you everyone else.
It was nice seeing so many of you here.